Welcome to the Bitcoin Suits podcast, where financial and tax advisors come together to explore the role of Bitcoin in modern planning and client services. I'm your host, Jordan Guess, a CPA and a Bitcoiner, working at the intersection of traditional finance and the future of money. Alrighty, we are live. Thanks for coming back to listen to another episode of the Bitcoin Suits. Today, we have Arnell Sia, CPA. He runs a company called Open Path Finance. And I'm excited to get to talk to Arnell a little bit more today. We've never met in person, but we've interacted probably since January or February of this year. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Kind of what is your
Yeah,
background? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
yeah, and thank you. Good being here, Jordan. Like you said, my name's Arnell Sia. I run an accounting firm called Open Path Finance. We are a Bitcoin-focused accounting firm with Bitcoin as our niche. The types of clients that we have are all over, mainly business owners in different industries. But the common thread is many of them are Bitcoiners through and through and understand the power of Bitcoin and how it's changed their lives and also their businesses. And so that's kind of what we do and the people that we serve. And it's very interesting because a lot of us have similar stories. Now, I'm sure with the people that you serve and that you've spoken with, there's common threads in there as well.
Yeah, so talk me through, because we both do similar things. So we're gonna have fun, I think, with this conversation. Just you and I both know the struggles that come with doing tax work and the
Hmm.
seasonality and all that kind of fun stuff. So I know in my own firm, I don't work with actually a lot of a lot of Bitcoiners, and so I was curious to hear your story. Maybe we start there. I mean, has it
Yeah.
always been that way since you started your business, that you just focused on Bitcoiners from the start? Or did it have did people start reaching out to you, or have you kind of actually over time cycled through non-Bitcoin clients in order
Yeah.
to increase the percentage that are Bitcoiners?
It's kind of morphed into that. And really it starts, so my first client started as a Bitcoin mining company. Let me go into a little bit about my background because it
Yeah.
flows into this story. So for about a decade prior to starting my own firm, I was leading finance within tech startups, high scale startups and scaling startups. And one of those first places was a company that was in the public transit space, providing them software. This is probably around 2016, 2017, right around that bull market for Bitcoin at that point. And that was my first exposure to Bitcoin. The two co-founders there were heavily into Bitcoin at that time. They convinced other people to look into it. I unfortunately ignored it at that point. Um, but I stuck around for a few years. We eventually had an amazing exit, um, and it was just a very fun time for me personally and professionally. And I formed a lot of deep relationships and friendships with my colleagues there. Well, after we had sold that company, um, one of the co-founders was trying to figure out what he wanted to do next, and he started doing some investing and some other stuff, but he still had this Bitcoin thing in the back of his mind. And he was dabbling in some Bitcoin mining. He ran into some issues with some of those early providers back then, and because of these issues that he's running into, just with the unreliability, and this is very early days of companies getting into Bitcoin mining and providing it as a service. He decided, hey, I should just start my own Bitcoin mining firm because of the unreliability of some of these sites and providers. And so that company today is Megawatt. I was there pretty much from the beginning. My friend, his name is Ilya, he's the CEO over there. He had asked me to join on board as an advisor, early on advisor, and they were our very first clients. So really, Bitcoin was part of the DNA from the beginning of my firm. Um, I hadn't really set out to start a firm until he asked me to help them out. And then from there, I started getting other friends and family. They weren't all Bitcoiners. Um, but I think over time, my conviction right around, I'd say 2020 is when I got into Bitcoin and considered it seriously. Is when I got deep into, as they say, the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and just poured myself into learning more about it, the network, the ethos, and I started realizing, how it can be so pivotal for families and people starting to go on their own path. Along the way, I struggled within my career just as someone who was stumbling around trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I don't know, a little bit not feeling like I want to do the corporate rat race anymore, or the startup life anymore. At least going for those big exits. And so over time, I wanted to go full time into this business, and so I went full time into it last year. Have been building it out over the past 3 years on the side, and over that time, I've been getting clients from all over the place, but a lot of them are Bitcoiners. And so to answer your question, it's not like I set out to be a Bitcoin focused accounting firm, but I just started seeing a need within the community and the marketplace of people who um, really need someone who understands Bitcoin. And unfortunately, as you know, within our circles, within accountants, there's not that many Bitcoin accountants. I mean, you and I are part of a group. We can count how many there really are. And I know it's going to grow here over the next few years. But people are looking for professionals and other people who align with their goals and incentives and ways of thinking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's part of one of the goals of the podcast, right? Is to spread the knowledge a little bit and bring more and more CPAs and EAs and accountants into this fold. One, I think you get to work with a great client type. Bitcoiners are just a different breed of
They
people,
are.
and so there's that piece, right? I mean, we have an incentive. It's funny to actually keep quiet about this a little bit, right? But I think our industry. I'm sure you've seen this in your world. I always think back to that Bible verse that's the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. That's what it feels like to be in the tax,
Yes,
small business and
I think
individual
that's a
tax.
good analogy here. Hmm.
So yeah, I think it's great to continue to expand the network of qualified professionals who understand what Bitcoin is, how can it improve the lives of their clients, and then also like the nitty gritty details of how does the tax component work. So
Yeah, exactly. And one common issue or complaint that I've noticed when people come to me and my firm, uh, the common thing that they say is, I have an accountant. They're great, except for this Bitcoin part. Either they don't understand it and they look at me funny, or they are vehemently against Bitcoin, and I just don't want that judgment from someone that I'm working with. And so Bitcoiners like working with other Bitcoiners, and I think that's going to just continue to grow here.
yeah, absolutely. So I don't think I told you, but this podcast was born out of a guy I met down in Fort Lauderdale, actually at a Bitcoin mining event. So this whole podcast is kind of put on by a company called Bitcoin Mining World, and it's been great because we get to jump on here, and Scott, who runs that, he's generous enough to have basically everything else taken care of, the editing and all of that kind of stuff.
Oh,
But
that's fun.
there's
Yeah.
a few other podcasts in this network that are mining related. And so it's interesting to me that you kind of got your start with this mining, company that did Bitcoin mining early on. Maybe talk us through what was early days on the accounting and finance side of a of a Bitcoin mining company? What was that like? What roadblocks did you run into at that time?
Yeah, so I think one at that time, one of the biggest roadblocks. I mean, as we know, um, the accounting rules for digital assets in general, and especially Bitcoin, has just recently changed, which aligns more with investors and business operators, their expectations of how they use Bitcoin. But previous to this, that's not the case because it was a very brand new asset class. Congress didn't know much about Bitcoin. They didn't know, the IRS didn't know much about Bitcoin and how it should be handled. And so, um, and the accounting boards didn't understand it either. And so they just lumped it into a very broad asset class of intangible assets. Um, and essentially, what that meant was when the price of Bitcoin rose, a company couldn't show that on their financials. They essentially had to record the price of Bitcoin at the cost that they either earned it at or received the Bitcoin at. Which for a lot of these Bitcoin mining companies, right? I mean, it could have appreciated multiples upon multiples, yet they weren't able to show that on their financials. So prior to me starting this firm, I also worked at an AI bookkeeping firm that was very tech focused, and we had some Bitcoin and crypto clients as well. And I remember this was a very common struggle and frustration, point of frustration for our clients because they're like, I'm looking at my Coinbase account, right, and my Bitcoin is showing $200,000 worth, and on my financials, it's showing half of that. Like, what gives? And then on the flip side, when even though you couldn't record the gain of Bitcoin, you did need to record what's called an impairment loss. So it's like the worst of both worlds, right?
Yeah.
They're getting penalized for it. And so whenever the price of Bitcoin decreased, they had to show that loss on their financials. That was one thing that working with this mining company that we had to figure out and grow through. Thankfully, accounting standards have changed where we're able to show the price appreciation of that Bitcoin within the financial statements. Um, the other thing is how do we show the income for the mining rewards, and what does gain and loss on selling the Bitcoin look like? So that those were some of the struggles that we've been through. Thankfully, there's so many resources now, just with Riot and Marathon and all these public miners, that they each had to go through these same struggles as well. But I've been able to help small business owners and smaller companies that aren't the size of a publicly traded Bitcoin mining company in these same struggles as well, who might not have as many resources as these companies. So it's been cool, and it's been fun just seeing the evolution of Bitcoin and accounting, and specifically in the mining industry.
That makes sense. Are you, something that I run across from time to time is the argument of getting sats through mining in a more tax efficient way because of your ability to depreciate the Bitcoin miners on
Yeah.
Schedule C, for example. Are you
hmm
running into that quite a bit on your side? And then I guess maybe one additional question is, if we do see the 100% bonus depreciation come back through the big beautiful bill, how do you think that that affects the Bitcoin mining space and people being able to acquire Bitcoin
Oh,
for potentially a lower cost basis given the tax offsets?
yeah. This is actually a huge topic. So I wrote a thread on it recently. It actually blew up much bigger than I had anticipated. It was in collaboration with this client of mine, Megawatt. And so because of that, I'm in partnership with them, and there's another mining company as well that is interested in a strategy like this. But yeah, like you said, 100% bonus depreciation is coming. It's not something widely talked about because there just aren't that many accountants in the Bitcoin space. But the reason this is such a big deal is I liken it to real estate, where for decades now, a high income earner working in the real estate sector. They're able to buy a massive piece of property, do a cost segregation study on it, break it down into its fundamental parts, and then based off of what they were able to do there on the accounting side, they were able to take big portions of it and write off uh, sometimes 100% of some of these assets, and turn it into almost no revenue or no taxable income for that year, or even negative taxable income, allowing them to offset some of their other income. And it's why, like people like Donald Trump or some of these real estate moguls can claim, in the past I've taken 0% taxes. I've paid 0% taxes in a certain year because this is the same type of strategy that they're employing. Well, with 100% bonus depreciation coming into play, um, people can do similar things within the Bitcoin space and Bitcoin mining, and taking the ASIC miners, which are a large investment, and claim 100% deduction on those, which could potentially reduce or even eliminate their taxable income for this year. So
Yeah.
I've actually seen a lot of interest in it just the past 2, 3 weeks here as we speak.
Okay. And how close are you following the workings of DC? I guess are you bullish that we're going to get the bill passed?
Yeah, I'm bullish.
Okay.
Now, for context, to maybe those who aren't very close to bonus depreciation, we've had bonus depreciation in the past. I think it was maybe you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 2020 it was 100%, and then they brought it down, I think 20% each year. Where this year, if this new bill doesn't pass, we'll have 40% bonus depreciation, which is nice.
Yeah.
It's still something, but not as impactful as 100%. And they're wanting to do this because it's going to spur on investment and the economy. So I'm very hopeful. I know there's a lot of infighting right now just on a lot of the specifics of the bill. My guess is they eliminate a lot of the fluff, but keep in some of these core aspects like bonus depreciation, overtime, and some of these other big ticket items that we're hearing on there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be
Yeah,
curious.
what's your take?
Yeah, no, I agree with basically what you're saying. I think they're going to get it done. I think that they can't afford to not get it done. And
Hmm.
so the Republicans are not going to be able to let taxes increase at year end by, if they were to not get something over the finish line. And yeah, I think having, like you said, a real estate mogul as the president, I think he's going to get 100% bonus depreciation
Yeah,
through
I
through
think
there
so too.
and be able to utilize that
I
through.
think so too.
So
Yeah, but
yeah,
the
I agree.
implications are huge on this, right? Because
Yeah,
if and when 100% bonus depreciation comes through, and I'm speaking with prospects and clients right now who they're expecting a lot of income this year than what they might have in the past. Just with like one situation is, they're doing really well in their business, right? And how do you business owners pay the most amount of taxes? How do we offset some of that? And they're already interested in Bitcoin and particularly Bitcoin mining. And because of these tax benefits, using that to reduce their income. Another scenario that's common is, someone wants to purchase Bitcoin, they end up liquidating their retirement accounts. Now, I'm not advocating for that. I think we each have to come to our own conclusion on that. There's a lot of tax implications related to it, but because they liquidate their 401k or whatever retirement accounts that they have, that's considered taxable income. Well, how do they reduce that taxable income? So it could be a very huge tool in reducing that tax burden.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, similar situation. Met at a conference
Hmm.
a few months back, and he's trying to liquidate real estate that has fairly low cost basis and needs to, at the very least, right, understand what the tax implications are going to be to sell the real estate. Um, and so we've considered some Bitcoin mining opportunities as a way to take a portion of the funds, the net funds he was going to put into Bitcoin, and put it into Bitcoin miners. That I think in his case we would most likely do a hosted mining setup. I'd be
Yeah.
curious to get your thoughts. Is that mostly the route that you are seeing clients go?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, unless someone is willing to put in the investment for setting up the infrastructure and working with power companies to secure very low rates, or however they're securing the power, it's going to be difficult for most people to go into that type of venture completely on their own or with other partners, and creating that infrastructure. The great thing about these hosted mining companies is they've already done that heavy lifting of securing that infrastructure and securing cheap energy. And really, that's probably the biggest equation when it comes to the formula of how profitable you are within Bitcoin mining is, right? How quickly or how cheaply can you secure that energy power? And we're seeing with these hosted energy miners, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9 cents per kilowatt hour, depending on the location and what they're able to secure. Whereas, power rates at home are probably 20, 30 cents per kilowatt hour, which
Yeah.
would eat into profits or maybe even make it not profitable for most people to mine at home or have some sort of infrastructure. So, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people going that hosted mining setup.
Okay, cool. So is that a service that you provide through your firm? Not obviously nothing to do with the physical mining itself, but are you helping a client run some models to understand kind of the buy versus mine comparison?
So the actual buy versus mine, I let the hosted miners determine that. So
Okay.
typically, when a customer is coming to me, they've already gone through those calculations, and they understand a little bit of the tax implications, um, and they understand the profitability and which miners to buy at what rate and what power rate as well. And at that point in the conversation, really what they're looking for is, okay, walk me through what does this look like on the tax side, and what I need to do to make sure that we have this show up in the tax return and then also in compliance, with tax law. And so they really come to me on the tax advisory piece of what we need to do, to start up that operation from a financial and tax perspective.
Very cool. Yeah, that
Mhm.
makes perfect sense. What would you say the biggest risk, and maybe if you want to deflect here, you totally can to a hosted mining company. But and maybe I'll just preempt this a little bit. I see a risk in Bitcoin mining where the price runs away from you. And say you have $1 million that you want to put into Bitcoin today, and maybe that could get you, about 10 Bitcoins versus you take about $1 million and you go purchase Bitcoin miners, and then you're mining, some amount of Bitcoin. And it's like in certain scenarios with the price and the hash rate, you outperform,
Mhm.
how much you could have purchased, right? But then I guess if I'm just trying to play risk management, isn't there a risk if the price runs away that you actually end up mining less Bitcoin than
Less
you would,
Bitcoin.
right?
Yeah,
That's a big variable.
exactly.
Okay.
I think that is the biggest concern when people look at Bitcoin, just Bitcoin mining itself, comparing it between buying spot Bitcoin at the price today versus buying some miners and then earning some income off of that. Um, I think I've seen, I mean, you and I have seen both posts. Most of the time, it's actually better to buy Bitcoin than buy a miner. And it really depends on where we are in the cycle. And again, how cheaply you're able to secure that electricity. And so I've seen a lot of success just with the clients that I work with who are already doing this prior to the bonus depreciation. But it is a huge concern. But I think there's been a shift recently in the way people are thinking about it. Because if you're just comparing Bitcoin price versus Bitcoin mining. How much sats, how much Bitcoin am I going to end up with after 2 years? You know, that's one comparison. I think for a lot of people, they would inch over on buy Bitcoin most of the time, unless they're able to find an opportunity that really makes sense with these hosted miners. But what's switching now is they're comparing Bitcoin mining not to buying Bitcoin, but to the taxes that they have to owe here at the end of the year. And hey, what opportunities are there for me to really reduce that taxable income? And so when you look at it from that perspective, Bitcoin mining becomes very appealing to a lot of people now.
Yeah. Yeah, and it should be mentioned as well, probably the other value add, I guess, for a client who wants to acquire Bitcoin through mining is that it's KYC free. And
Yes,
if that's important to someone, uh, then, you know, they're, even if you might be actually paying a little bit more over time, some people are okay with that premium because it's not traceable back to their personal identity. So
exactly. Yeah, that's a big point. I'm someone coming from real estate, they might have some other areas that might be appealing to them. They don't have to rely on unreliable tenants who might, destroy some of their property, or, they might have some leases that go without tenants for a while. They don't have to worry about that. They're relying on a machine and math in this case.
absolutely. Well, let's pivot just a little bit because so the audience, like we talked about before we hit record, the audience of this show is intended to be people like us, whether they're in the Bitcoin space or maybe they're Bitcoin curious, and so I think it's very interesting. One of the main reasons that I started doing this and why I started thinking about doing a Bitcoin summit for advisors is just I think people are getting more and more questions about it, and you kind of get these professionals that fall into two camps of like, I've done the research, I understand what Bitcoin is, I can also explain to you why Bitcoin's different from other cryptocurrencies. And there's a lot to dive into there, right? And then the other camp of people is they scoff at it, they say it's not legitimate. I haven't done any time researching that because I think it's a fad or it's tulips or whatever they want to
Mhm.
say, right? And so we're trying to have this be a place where people can come to learn more things like what we're talking about right here. So, well, I guess one last thing actually to wrap that part up is I'm going to DC a little bit later this month for the Bitcoin Policy Institute's like the policy summit. One thing
Mhm.
that I hope comes up on the mining side is having Bitcoin mining be treated the same as extracting oil or any other commodity, right? Where you don't actually end up paying, you don't have to recognize the income at the fair value when you receive the commodity. I think that would be huge, so that someone could mine Bitcoin and they're not having to recognize that as income right away.
Yep,
They only pay
right
tax
away.
when they sell it, right?
Yeah.
So,
And
so
that's
we'll see.
actually an area that I'm learning more about, and I see the appeal just with a lot of the credits and incentives within oil and gas drilling and the royalties related to that area. It'll be interesting to see what actually happens there.
Yeah, no, I agree. So let's talk a little bit. I know I've mentioned this summit to you. We met early on, and then
Hmm.
we got connected with, or you connected me with a group of accountants. I don't know what we're up to now, but I think it was like 40 at the time, and so
Hmm.
we're a small but powerful group, I think. Um, but yeah, so we're looking at the summit to be actually in Denver, Colorado, so kind of out your way, at least halfway between uh, you or me in Denver, I guess, right? Um, and we're looking at October, November. So Wyatt O'Rourke and Joey Marty. Wyatt's a financial planner, and then Joey is an accountant that actually works for Pacioli.
Hmm.
So they're both board members at the space, and so yeah, it's excited.
That's
We don't
exciting.
have a date exactly nailed down yet, but it's October, November's are the two months that we're looking at. And then here's the other thing: we're trying to get continuing education
Oh,
credits
yeah.
to be applied, so that yeah, so everyone
That's
come out, enjoy Denver, get some of the credits you already have to get, no matter
get the
what.
credits, networking event, get to
Yeah,
know some
exactly.
other Bitcoiners that are in the same space. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I'm,
So
I'm looking forward to hearing more as the details get fleshed out here.
yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I would say, the conversations we're having here in some ways are the precursor to some of the programming that is to come there. So yeah, we'll all stay tuned there. But I've never been to the space that's out there in
I
Denver.
haven't either.
Okay, cool. It's good to know.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
haven't.
we'll
Hmm.
experience it together. I've heard only good things though. Um, I want to shift a little bit. So talk me through, I think one very interesting part, and well, if you don't want to share, you don't have to. So just feel free to decline. Um, but one interesting thing I think about you is how you've set up your life with work and travel and family. Do you mind sharing a little bit
Oh
about
yeah,
how you've
yeah. I
how
love
big
sharing this.
has
Yeah,
Bitcoin, like, has it played into that transition for
it
you, or were you
it
going to do that
definitely
no matter what?
has. It
Okay.
definitely has. So actually, today this ties into the story. Today, our firm has just rebranded. Previously, it was Sia CFO. Sia is my last name, and it was honestly just a name that I needed to choose and incorporate as I was getting some of my initial clients coming in from friends and family. I was like, I don't know what name to pick, so I just picked my last name as the company name. Well, as we've continued to grow and we've realized who we are, the people that we're serving, and some of our culture and values and DNA, we realized a lot of the people that we're working with are people who are trying to chart their own course and chart their own path, and they're trying to get out of this rat race of whatever it is. Something isn't working in this world, the world that they're currently experiencing, and so they find Bitcoin and they use it to improve their lives in some way. And so that's the reason we chose Open Path Finance, because people are charting their own path and we're trying to help them along that journey. Well, a lot of this started with me personally as well. Like I said, right around 2020 is really when I dove into Bitcoin, and it really had me thinking, what was I doing with my life and the way that I was leading it. I had one version of some dreams and goals and the way that I wanted my life to be led, and how I wanted to raise my family. I'd say that completely pivoted right around that time of getting into to Bitcoin. Um, and now what that looks like is 2022, we sold our house to live and travel full time in an RV. We actually have a family of four children, so there's six of us in this RV, grand RV, and we're just traveling from national park to national park, and it's been a blast. Now, there's been struggles along with it, but I think the struggles have been worth it along this journey because of where we're trying to go and the experiences that we're having here. So actually, this upcoming week, as we're recording this, um, we are about to head out on a big trip to the Pacific Northwest. I'm originally from Indianapolis. We're making our way and building some roots in Tulsa, but right now we're about to go Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington, a lot of those national parks in that area. But along the way, as I was saying, we purchased some acreage and some property down just south of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And eventually, where we're headed towards is building a homestead and a farm down there where I can raise my family and teach them some of these values that I've been learning the past few years here, just being orange pilled and learning some of these values along the way.
That's incredible, man. I mean, it is really cool to see how Bitcoin changes people in ways that just buying Apple stock just doesn't change a person. I don't know
Yeah,
what it is, right? but
Hmm.
it forces for some people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, it forces a priority shift in your life.
Priority shift. Yep. And aligning of those values. I think that's what really shifted it for me, was realizing a lot of the values that the Bitcoin ethos, just from its roots and beginning, and the community, is were stuff that I align with. And how do I make my own life in alignment with these values as well?
Yeah.
And so I've heard countless stories, and I'm sure you have as well, of people who have done some crazy things so that they were more in alignment with what they wanted to do because of Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love where you're coming at things from because it is a unique position that we find ourselves in that, you know, there's a pretty strong argument to be made that taxes, I wish this weren't true, but taxes are most families' largest lifetime expense.
Hmm.
And you know, it's an opportunity cost there of, well, if you pay something to the federal government or to your state government, you know, that's money that couldn't go to help your family in whatever way you choose. And on top of that, there's even a little bit like it's like a knife in my back and you twist it when you think about the tax money you spend plus the potential appreciation over time and the compounding nature that could come out of most likely
Exactly.
out of that, right? And
Yeah.
you know, you see, you know, no matter what anybody thinks about politics, I think everyone can agree that if it's exposed that there's fraud or there's funds that are just being spent at the governmental level and we don't have a great answer to know where that money's going and I just think it makes a lot of I don't know if you've heard this in your practice, but I'm getting the sense more and more, even from non-Bitcoiners, that are they're just tired and they're um, and even bringing up ideas to try to push the limits on tax minimization, if we want to call it that, just because there's just a sense, and I get it from people on both sides of the political spectrum for different reasons, but there's just a sense of just being exhausted, and
Yeah.
I think Bitcoin is the solution that, at least for my client base, they don't fully appreciate. And of course, in some ways, it's not my job to be, you know, to be telling them all about Bitcoin. Of course, it comes up from time to time,
Of
and I'm
course.
always like, I'm available if you ever want to talk. I guess how have you? I mean, it sounds like you don't really have that issue. It sounds like it's much more of a. I'm picturing a kumbaya, like you and your clients are like they've all got it
Li-
figured out, and you all
Like
are
I
like,
said, not all of my client base are
no, okay,
Bitcoiners, especially some of my earlier clients. I'd say probably what's common across the entire base is, wanting to chart their own path and do what's best for them and their family. A lot of times that looks like Bitcoin, right? Whether it's they have a dental practice and they're saving some of their income and their profits in Bitcoin, or it is a Bitcoin mining company. But the conversation does come up a lot, just because, one, I'm active on Twitter, on X, and I'm tweeting constantly about this and how it can benefit people and their businesses and their families. But then also, just recently, right, with the incoming administration being more crypto friendly, Bitcoin friendly, it's becoming more mainstream in uh, in the American psyche, and people are more interested and more accepting of it and more curious of it. Um, and naturally, there are only a handful of people, when people think about Bitcoin, that they can talk to. And in my circle, it's me, and maybe someone else, and I'm sure it's the same way with you. There's only a few of us out there that have been really, um, quote unquote, preaching this from the rooftops, right?
yeah,
For a few years now.
yeah, and I'm glad you said that because there are only a handful, especially in someone's local community, and
Hmm.
then beyond that, I from what I've seen, especially with financial advisors that I speak to on a regular basis. The other thing that comes up is, we live in this age, I both know this well, where there's so much information, right? There's so many
Yeah.
podcasts. There's like an endless amount, right, of information that's out there on the internet for people to consume. And, one more reason for this show and for that summit, specifically for the audience that we're talking about or talking to, is to be very clear about the principles of Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? But I want to ask you, because I see this all the time, is people get questions about crypto. How do you try to navigate a conversation with a client who is not, they're just trying to learn, but
Hmm.
they're like, well, I missed the boat on Bitcoin, so I'm going to go look at it XRP, or I'm going to go look at it, pick whatever, fart coin.
Yeah.
How do you approach those conversations, or do you go down that path with a client? Or yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know.
So thankfully, well, I'll take it from two perspectives. Clients or prospective clients that are coming to me, a lot of times that's not even part of the conversation because they look at the content, they look at the website, and they realize, I'm Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. Now, that's not to say I won't accept a client who might have some Ethereum or some Dogecoin or whatever else, but for the most part, there's some sort of, I don't know, self-filtering mechanism from a client and business perspective. But when I interact with someone outside of that space, let's say friends or family or someone random, who's talking about Bitcoin and crypto more broadly, um, it is definitely a point of conversation there as to what they're doing and why they're doing things. We keep seeing the same conversations happening each cycle, though, as I've missed the boat. How many cycles are we into this? And I've missed the boat. And I think we're going to continue saying that. Um, but every time I point them back to just how you think you've missed the boat every single time. Every single time, there's also countless of stories of people who think they've missed the boat. They've gone into these other cryptocurrencies thinking that they're on the boat, and this boat ends up sinking. And so I think, at least from my mind, I think showing them some of this data and some of these stories of past failures and mistakes of investors and some of the fraud of these other projects and coins, it really opens their eyes to a lot of it. Now, how effective am I? I don't know. It depends person to person. There's only so much that you can do to convince someone within a short amount of time frame. But yeah, it definitely gets
Great way
brought
to
up.
do tax loss harvesting if you wanted to get into other cryptocurrencies, right?
Sorry, say that again.
It's a great way to do some tax loss harvesting
Oh
if you
yeah, yeah, yeah,
if you
it is.
allocate to some other.
Maybe one positive thing.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I think that's going to be an important piece of education. I mean, the basic thesis is that the normal American makes their financial decisions based off of recommendations from
Recommend
guys
it.
like
Yeah.
me on the tax side, and then from their financial advisor
From the,
on
hmm
the wealth
hmm
management side of things. And so, I
I'm curious
just
to know, how do you approach those conversations?
yeah, so I end up having, with the whole run up in 2021, I ended up having several NFT related clients that came my way. And yeah, and I don't know what attracted, because I'm not as active as you are on Twitter for sure. But I think it's pretty clear, more and more so now, that I'm Bitcoin only. And if anyone asks me, I mean, I'm honest with them. I'm
Hmm.
Bitcoin only. I don't have I've never really looked into anything else near. I mean, I've done thousands of hours, I feel like, of research now on Bitcoin over the past 4 years. I got in about the same time as you. And um and so one way I approach it is, look, I'm just not qualified to speak on the mechanics behind Ethereum or Solana or any of those. Bitcoin, we can go down. I can talk to you for a long time about that, and answer questions and hear your thoughts on things. And so I kind of weasel out of
Take
it
a
that
neutral
way a little bit.
stance. Yeah.
But if somebody is I think it's more so on the financial advisor because obviously we don't give investment advice,
Hmm.
and so I always am pretty careful with what I say in those types of conversations. And I was at a advisor market outlook for 25 back in January, and a question came up about cryptocurrencies and stuff, and I just wasn't impressed with the answer given. And you could tell that there just wasn't they hadn't looked into it, and that's
Yeah.
fine. But it's going to be, I think, required if you want to keep your clients as a wealth manager going forward. You're going to have a good answer, um, and and I would say if at the very least be able to explain the key differences between Bitcoin and every other cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
As long as you can do that, I think that meets the threshold for me. Um, so
Yeah. And at
yeah,
least educating them. Like you said, we can't advise them on what to do. But we
yeah,
can definitely educate them of what we know.
yeah, and point them in the right direction as
Hmm.
well. And yeah, that's another piece. I do want to get. Actually, I've got two more questions. I know we're about 45 minutes in. I've got one question about this about income around Bitcoin. Um, do you have any thoughts on how people are trying to earn, just earn income from their Bitcoin, the yield on their Bitcoin? And two things I'll highlight, and then I'll throw it over to you. Um, Obviously, this MSTY is like, I guess maybe not as much the craze anymore. But there for 2 weeks, it seemed like that was all I saw
Hmm.
on my feed. And kind of doing the call option strategy, maybe even just an option strategy generally on a stack of IBIT, for example, selling puts or selling calls. So maybe you could speak on that a little bit if you have any strong opinions. And then the other thing, I don't know if you're in Vegas or if you saw the announcement from Cash App Square where they said that they were earning close to 10% on their Bitcoin stack by routing Lightning payments. Um, and
Hmm.
and I've heard from Amboss that it sounds like they have a Square specifically has an advantage because they have so many users, and the flow of money going in and out is kind of an anomaly. Sounds like more realistically, you could earn 1 to 4% is what I've understood on your Bitcoin if you open up a large enough Lightning channel. But all that to say, do you have any strong thoughts on just how people, maybe not exactly today, but in the future, are going to be able to earn legitimate income, legitimate yield? I know that's a dirty word on their Bitcoin stack.
On their Bitcoin stack. Yeah. So I take the stance of keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And all of these investments and financial products from MicroStrategy and some of these other ones, MetaPlanet as well, I won't even claim that I understand them fully. Unfortunately, I haven't done my research into them, but also because I'm very risk averse as well, especially when it comes to my Bitcoin stack. And
Right.
so I'd say one thing: look at it from the frame of risk and making sure that you fully understand what you're getting into, especially when you're comparing it to how much of a Bitcoin stack can I get. And I think that will serve most people well. Um, the other thing that has come up, recently and in the past is borrowing against your Bitcoin, right? So maybe not even earning an income, but using some of that Bitcoin so they don't have to sell it. Borrowing against it is not a taxable event, but there's still a risk involved with those. And we saw, a couple of years ago with Celsius and BlockFi and some of those companies, they went bankrupt and people put a big portion of their stack at risk, or even most of their stack at risk, by putting it on these platforms. I was one of them, actually. I got into BlockFi fairly early on when they announced it to the public. Started earning a yield and interest on my Bitcoin, which was cool, seeing the additional sats that I was able to get on my Bitcoin. And thankfully, uh, there were people warning about the risks of it on Twitter at that time, and I got too scared and took it out. Probably. 6 months before they went bankrupt. And I
Wow.
think we're going to see some of those things pop up. Now, the industry is getting more mature, and we're seeing more companies out there with some great products. However, I think in the future, we'll get to the point where right now it's still too expensive. And there's still a lot of risk, especially with rehypothecation or them holding the keys to your Bitcoin. There's still a lot of risk. I see a future where more Bitcoin lending products are made available that makes sense. Um, Here's what I recommend though, for me and my clients, whenever someone's coming to me, again, my client base are high income earners who are business owners, or they're wanting to start a business. And I'd say after Bitcoin, financial freedom, financial sovereignty, the next best way to do that is having an asset that you own that can produce you an income, namely a business. And so that's what I'm seeing a lot of my clients doing. I think it's been true for decades and centuries, and I think it will continue to be true as long as the economic and political conditions are there. And I think that's why America is such a great nation, because we have those economic and political foundations that allow many people to go after this version of their American dream and start a business that serves them and their family. And then from there, hopefully your business grows. You're able to take the profits from that and continue to stack more Bitcoin. I think
Yeah.
that's the surest way of people to continue to build their stack.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. I mean, yeah, I sat in on a presentation that, seems legit, but,
Hmm.
uh, and it was all routing payments. I mean, I've been hearing a lot of this, basically depositing some amount of your Bitcoin stack into a Lightning channel
Hmm.
and routing the payments and taking a fee. I mean, like, at least that makes sense to me because, yeah,
Yeah.
when the Celsius thing and all of that, I'm like, well, where is this yield? Like, if no one can explain to me simply where's the yield coming from,
Hmm.
then it's just smoke and mirrors, right? And so it will be interesting. But I think the point I wanted to make to close out that is that it's all the more important that guys like you and I are vetting partners that we end up, referring clients to, because obviously we don't do
Exactly.
everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And so if someone wants to buy Bitcoin, even something as simple as that, where do we refer them? And
Hmm.
and where do we not refer them? And because there's reputational risk for us if we
Hmm.
send a client to something that blows up, and especially if there was ever any indicators that we just didn't look into close enough. It's a big deal. So
Yeah,
okay,
it's tough. I'd say before Bitcoin, I mean, we looked at partners, we looked at relationships, and we based it solely on trust and if we like them. I still think that is a very big part of it today, but especially in the Bitcoin world and with how valuable of an asset, there's another component of not just blindly trusting the people that we're working with, but also understanding the inner workings of their product and what they're doing and the risks associated with it.
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, this has been super fun. I've got one more just fun question,
Yeah, shoot.
and I don't feel bad because you doxed your Indianapolis roots. All right. So what? Give me an unbiased. What is the prediction on the NBA Finals? Do you even watch
Oh,
the NBA Finals?
yeah, Pacers.
Pacers
Pacers in six.
in how many games?
Pacers in six. It's
Pacers
it's
in
actually really
six.
fun though, because like I said, I'm originally from Indianapolis and I'm moving down to Tulsa. And so
Oh
both of my
yeah. Okay.
teams, the Pacers and the Thunder, are in the finals. I was thinking at the beginning of these playoffs, I'm not a regular. I'm more of a casual fan.
Yeah.
But as soon as the playoffs happened and I saw the Pacers gaining more steam, it's like, man, it would be really cool if the Pacers and the Thunder made it to the finals. It's a pipe dream, but it'll be cool.
And
Sure
then here
enough,
we are.
here we are today. So
So
yeah, I'm a
are you gonna try to go to? Well, I guess you're not gonna be in town. Probably you'll be out of
yeah.
Oklahoma. Yeah.
Unfortunately not. Yeah,
I
they
mean,
had a
I'm not
game
a big
here.
fan by any stretch. But it's the closest NBA team to me. And yeah, and they've been a fun team to watch. I was talking with
I have been.
Riley Combs over at
Yes.
Bitcoin Well, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
we were chatting earlier this week, and he was giving me the full rundown on the defense and everything. I was like, "Dang, Riley knows his stuff."
he's
I'm a
he's
complete
hardcore.
tourist.
Yeah, I gotta give him a talk and ask him about that.
Yeah,
That's good.
very cool. All right, well, I want to. Yeah, do you have any closing thoughts? Slash, where can people find you if they need a great Bitcoin or CPA for their business or personal situation?
Yeah. Closing thoughts. I think in the professional realm, Bitcoin is that big behemoth, and I think it will continue to be. We're at the very early stages of not only Bitcoin, but Bitcoin going into the professional realm. Um, like you said, there's only 40 of us in this accounting group. I don't know how many other Bitcoin accountants there are, but there's not that many. And doubly so for lawyers and financial advisors and other professionals. I think right now is a great time. If you're thinking about doubling down into Bitcoin, now's the time to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see some of that come into fruition here at my firm. And where people can find me, I'm on Twitter. Arnell Sia is my handle, or you can find me under Sovereign CPA. And then check out Open Path Finance. We provide tax advisory, bookkeeping, and tax filings for business owners.
Very cool. Man, thank you so much for coming on, taking the time. This has been great.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Jordan. It was fun.
Okay. All right, thanks.